Anyway, 7 minutes away, we'll get a news update. 10:06, switch it up a little bit here. Ashley Miller is a national speaker on sexuality, feminism, LGBTQ rights. Now, believe it or not, our time, tracking someone down to talk about this. And that gets back to the Leela Alcorn issue, which kind of is in the rearview mirror for us topic-wise. But I really wanted an answer to this. Is someone who is transgendered is, okay, I know the political correct aspect of this thing, but, honestly, if you're going to have a talk if you're a parent of a kid who's going through this crisis, how are you supposed to handle that if you're a mom or dad? Well, at 14, I'm supposed to just, jump into getting a reassignment surgery done? I don't think so. How do I know it's a phase? But just to say, well, it might be a phase somehow is insulting to transgendered people, which I don't understand. It's, it takes a while for mom and dad who, for 14 years, have known you as Josh, to all of a sudden throw a switch. It's cool with us. It takes a while. I have gay friends, the same thing. It takes a while for mom and dad to get down with the program. To go, okay, you know what, it takes a while, I'm a little in shock, but that's natural. It doesn't make them bad people. It's human nature. I don't think they get enough credit. Anyway, Ashley Miller at 10:06 on the Scott Sloan Show on 700 WLW. I don't have time for more of this as we spent the last hour talking. Just ahead here, Ashley Miller's on the Scott Sloan Show. So your kid comes and says, you know what, I'm transgendered. Time for surgery. Well, okay, that may be different if they're in their 20s, but if they come at you at 14 like Leela Alcorn did, how am I supposed to handle that? Ashley Miller would be one of the people, and she speaks nationally about transgendered issues, and the question I have to her is, all right, if I'm mom and dad, don't I get a little bit of time to have to let this soak in? I would think so. How you go about handling something like that? Ashley Miller's next. At 10:06, Scott Sloan Show, home of the Red, 700 WLW Cincinnati. It's the Scott Sloan Show at 700 WLW. So the issue of Leela Alcorn, the transgendered boy who believed to be a woman, taking her life a few weeks ago, December 27th, over the holidays because she couldn't live anymore in the world in which she was cast. And, it's bringing a host of different questions up about this, and the backlash is fast and furious. As a matter of fact, before I get to my guest about this, who is transgendered, and, the big question is, okay, if a 14-year-old comes to me, my kid comes to me and says I'm transgendered, do we give how much of a break to give the parents and saying, hey, there's got to be an adjustment period for them, too, which I think is true with the Alcorns. But then we have, this one seems to be a little extreme. Now, Jenna Den, one of our salespeople here, dropped this off, the Loveland Herald, which I think is one of those newspapers they throw in your driveway that you walk down. God, another free newspaper, and you pick it up and you throw it in your recycling. It's like I got to put a sign at the end of my driveway that says no free papers. Anyway, she reads these things, and there's a column in there written by this Randy Klein, traditional media, more about fantasy. It's like Billy Cunningham school here. Candlelight vigils have been held. Friends, and they use it in quotes, kind of like the man down by the river, and Chris Farley. Vigils and friends and news media and friends like this. Who needs enemies? That Josh rejected the counseling and medical treatment his parents secured for him. The news media is treating Joshua's self-murder as honorable when it should have been seen as a selfish act of a deluded narcissist who saw himself as a romantic martyr revolting against an evil, oppressive world brewed by Christian parents and others who thought to limit his personal wants by constantly referring to Joshua as Leela and by using the pronouns she and her and reporting the story. The news media become activists for the fantasy of transgenderism and becoming accessories to the pain and suffering of those who need healing. And it goes on to talk about the agendas of the news media, the conspiracies and all that stuff, and they seek to confuse already confused children and their evil and profitable purposes. And I don't know, I'll be honest with you, dude, when I hear about narcissism, I think a lot of people who are uber Christians are the narcissists. Because it's about, it's not about the desires or feelings or beliefs of the young person or young adult or adult. It's about their somehow, it's, and I've mentioned this before. It's like people in my family who somehow I think they feel like they get commission if you go to church. Like, well, how, did you go to church? Well, it's none of your business. If I'm a grown man, you don't get you don't get God commission if I go to church. How does that reflect on your religious beliefs? So I think, quite honestly, there's a lot of people, and I'm not all Christians here, but I'm talking about the uber Christians. The Christians who, hey, you know what, if I don't believe on the same, if I'm not into it on the same level you are, you have no room for me in your life kind of people. And I think really that's what drives people like this are driving people with a little bit of common sense and the like away from traditional church. There's a lot of places to worship out there, and this is what's killing traditional churches, that attitude. You know, the idea here that, I don't know, Leela is more narcissistic than maybe mom or dad, but that's a separate argument entirely. It's just, you know, it's about the media and the fantasy and that I'm absolutely right and you're absolutely wrong, and there's no give or take here. But that is a complex issue if you're the parent of a kid who comes to you suddenly at 14 and goes, hey, guess what? You knew me as Josh. I should be Leela. How does a mom or a dad, parents, deal with that issue? Not that very many people listening are going to have to face that, but you know, I don't think, on the other hand, parents are given enough a break when their kids come to them in a state of confusion, as you often do when you're young. How do I differentiate between sexual dysfunction or sexual function and the whims, the wants, and the trends of a teenager? It's tough. Joining me on 700 WLW to talk about this is, and on the Leela Alcorn story too, is a young lady who speaks about this nationally. And her name is Ashley Miller, and dealing with transgenders in your family, which, you know, in the light of Leela Alcorn, is kind of a big deal. And good morning, Ashley. How are we doing? Everything good?
Good morning. How are you?
Everything's well. Thank you very much. Around the tri-state, because she's from here, Leela Alcorn has been making news certainly for a while now, and with the Golden Globes last week, the mention, continues trending on Twitter and social media. As someone who speaks about sexuality, feminism, LGBTQ rights, and the like, if I am the parent of a 14-year-old boy, and my son comes to me and says, Mom and Dad, I'm a girl, I'm transgendered, how should mom and dad take that? Keep in mind, at age 14, I think this is the big question central to Leela Alcorn, is that if my child comes to me at 14 and says, I think I'm bisexual, I think I'm this or that, I don't know if that is a phase. I don't know if that's something to be taken seriously, but it seems like it may be unfair, and certainly unfairly, that the mom and dad in this case are still getting assailed. That they should have simply said at 14, okay, we accept you for who you are, and we should look at reassignment surgery. Is that a fair analysis? The reason I'm asking this is because you're an expert on it. You've gone through it. Tell me what the protocol should be from the LGBTQ standpoint.
Well, I think there's a couple of different things to unpack there. I think, one, Leela knew what she was going through since she was 4. So her parents would have seen signs of this since she was really young. Now, her parents may have been in denial about it, right? They may not have realized it until at 14 she comes to them. Mm-hmm. And so that's really tough, right? So what you need there is family therapy. And there are a lot of options that aren't, hey, let's go get gender reassignment therapy, reassignment surgery right now. There's something that's called puberty delay. There's something that will just let you sort of say, let's put the pause button on, let's prevent you from developing further in your current gender and sex, which doesn't involve changing your sex, right? Which just is saying, let's put the pause on this while we figure out what's going on.
How does that work? How do you put a pause on because at 14, I mean, let's face it, we're a little bit older than that, Ashley. You stopping something that's biological is pretty difficult. How do you do that? If that's the case, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be selling the stuff. You know what I'm saying?
So it's really easy. We figured out how to do it. You just it's basically blocking for somebody who was born male. It would be blocking testosterone, and so it prevents any further development in a male sexual direction. So Leela would have had the ability to put a pause on that. And one of Leela's big concerns was that she was developing so much in a masculine direction that she would never be able to pass. Mm-hmm. And so there's always the option for people who are not sure, parents who genuinely think their kids are maybe not sure yet, or whose parents
that's interesting.
Are like
so so you're basically taking a drug that stops the development of testosterone.
Exactly, and
okay.
There's something for women as well.
Okay,
people who are born women.
But isn't that problematic too? Because now you're going, okay, now I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to get a testosterone blocker or an estrogen blocker. And even that is intrusive. For a parent going, whoa, wait a minute now. You've always been, you're 14 years old. It seems to me that the LGBTQ community is not receptive to mom and dad, and I'm sure most transgenders have been through this before, certainly with parents. Some are more accepting than others, obviously, but this is really difficult. If your kid comes to you and goes, "Hey, I want a hormone. I want to put a pause on my sexual development," even that is extreme for mom and dad, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's really, really.
How do I handle it as a parent? Because I love my kid, but at the same time, it's like, well, how do I know you're not like I'll give you an example. And I've said this before. My daughter at 13 or 14. She comes out, she goes, Dad, Mom, Dad, I think I'm bisexual. We're like, well, she's boy crazy at 14 and, never had an inclination towards girls or, she had friends or whatever. I think I'm bisexual. Okay. Are you bisexual because it's the cool thing to do, or are you bisexual because you're bisexual? And we kind of dismissed her, said, yeah, okay, whatever. And then, of course, she's never dated a girl or, has had a boyfriend or whatever. But you know what I'm saying? So how do I know that in a phase?
But here's the thing, you don't, right? There's
right. So then how can you beat the parents up over that, right? The parents are trying to do the best they can.
Signs before they turn 14, right? You would have seen signs their whole life. But furthermore, this putting a pause on it, that's like a compromise where you say, you're 14, you're turning into an adult. I respect the fact that you're turning into your own individual. I'm not comfortable letting you make this full, huge decision, but I'm also not going to restrict you. And the other thing is, we're talking about a medical condition, right? Mm-hmm. If this was a kid who had cancer and their parents didn't believe in treating cancer, we wouldn't prosecute the parents for being abusive, for not wanting to treat the cancer, but we would enforce treatment, right? So if we think of this as a medical issue rather than as something else, then we say, okay, well, we can do something here that's good for the psychology of this kid. Transgender youth commit suicide at huge rates. What happened with Leela was predictable. And that's what's really sad is she'd been suicidal for months. She'd posted online about it repeatedly. And it was preventable, and it was predictable. And it could have been prevented by medical intervention really easily. And her parents put their foot down in a way that if it had been about any other medical issue, if it had been Jehovah's Witness parents preventing their kid from getting a blood transfusion, if it had been, hippy-dippy parents saying, we believe that crystals are going to heal you and chemo won't,
sure,
we would have said, no, that's not okay. But because we sort of don't think of mental health and gender issues as the same as cancer, even though rates of death are really, really high for transgendered and depressed youth, we don't treat them the same, and I think that's a mistake, and I think that's a failure of framing.
Isn't that a trap for you guys? Because just saying, hey, using that analogy that compare this to cancer. Well, it's not a disease; it's who you are. It's almost saying, like, okay, my skin color, for example. I'm Asian. I'm African American. Compare that to cancer. Isn't that a trap in the argument you guys are trying to? You don't want to align yourself with a deadly disease that, in most cases, of cancer are preventable.
Well, it's a condition, right? And it's only deadly because of the way people react to it and the social pressures. And the response to someone being transgender puts immense social pressures, both from parents and from people their own age. Leela was very lucky in that she had huge support from her peer group, but no support from her parents.
I think the big thing, too, though, is, because, Ashley, you're a little bit younger, too, though, is don't dismiss social media for something that's trivial, I think, as a parent, right? Because your whole, as a young person, your whole world is centered around social media. We used to socialize as a kid of the 80s by going to the mall or the arcade, play Pac-Man or Space Invaders or something like that. Previous generation, right, black and white stuff, it was about going to the football game and your poodle skirt and going to a malt shop or something, right? But today, kids socialize through social media. And taking that away for a short period of time is okay, but saying, hey, we're taking your phone, no social media, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Pinterest, none of that stuff. It's gone completely out of your life. That's like essentially imprisoning a kid for forever.
Yeah, and they pulled her out of school and took away all of that. And so she had no social outlet with people her own age. And that is so hard for somebody. And she is someone who several months ago went on, there's a site called Reddit, and said, why shouldn't I kill myself right now? And people talked her out of it then. Yeah. And she didn't do it in December, and that's a shame, right? But social media can be literally a lifesaver for kids because they can reach out to people their own age who are saying, hey, I've been there. It got better.
Right.
And she was really in a place where she thought it wasn't going to get better. And she was wrong, right? High school's hard. High school's really hard for most people because
it is.
You're in a place where you think, I know what's best for me. I'm practically an adult, and I don't have the power to make decisions over my own life. And that's everybody, right? That's everybody.
Well, my daughter's going through that now. I love her, but I don't like her.
Yeah, and that's before you add any issues. That's before you add depression. That's before you add questioning your sexuality. That's before you add any hard
So
stuff.
that's the context in which a parent like myself would look at this and go, I don't know if it's hormones, if it's the kid because it's a confused 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old. I don't know if it's tough. And what bothers me is, and what I don't like, the extremism of the parents, religiously speaking, but outside of that, the bigger context is, it's not like they wish that their kid kill themselves because it reflects badly on them. I think it's parents trying to do the best they can. And this thing's a tragedy as much for the mom and the dad as it is for the LGBTQ community. And I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair to go. I think it's unfair to just go after it's the parents' fault.
It's bigger for them. It's their kid, right? As much as I wish that she was, as much as I wish Leela Alcorn was still alive, I didn't know her on December 27th, right? I didn't spend the last 17 years of my life with her. For her parents, I understand where people are coming from, where they feel like it was an abusive situation. And it's really complicated in this country, our relationship with religion and with parenting and with giving people the freedom to believe things that I personally think are ridiculous. And
you have a generation gap. You have a generation gap there on top of it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's just hugely different worldviews. I mean, it's really complex.
It is.
And I don't think the parents should be punished any more than they are already being punished. They've lost their kid.
Yeah. Good for you. I mean, that's good because I think there's a lot of people who have an agenda, feminists and the like, and certainly transgenders that are just assailing the mom and dad and want to, somehow at 14, I'm supposed to go, okay, well, I guess, we're going to pause your sexuality or do a gender reassignment surgery. It's just, as a parent of teenagers, I don't see that happening. It would take a long time for me to come to grips with it. Let him know, I love you unconditionally, but I need time to sort this out. And I don't know if that would have saved Leela, though. You know what I'm saying?
You would have gone to therapy. You would have gone to therapy with your kid. You would have tried to figure it out. You would have said, okay, clearly you think this is a thing. I'm going to try to figure it out with you. I'm going to follow recommendations from a doctor. I'm going to, listen to what you're saying. They just tried to shut her down. And that's, I think, the difference between a good parent and a bad parent.
You're a dumb kid. I know what's best. Yeah. Right. I got you. I got you.
And I think that
like with my daughter, I would have said, well, I kind of knew something was going on there because the time she'd be playing Barbie and they were both Barbies were naked, and I thought, okay, there's some. Actually, there's something going on there. I don't know. She's using a light
because I don't have enough Kindle.
Right. I know. Right. Because she's trying to glue a light bright peg to the private part. Ashley Miller, thanks so much for the time, Ashley. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.